Okay, all right, so this particular session is going to cover boot management. Okay, so once your system is booting up, there's so many things that's going on in the background in order for it to get to the login screen. So, all right, so right now I'm currently on a Rails 6 system. I have my Rails 6 system here, and I have my Rails 7 system there as well. Okay, so we're going to go over the boot process. So I'm going to send over some documentation for this particular topic that we're going to cover. So after the class, I'll send you over some documentation that will help you assist and in your study for this particular topic. Okay, so the Linux boot process. All right, so let me know if you can all see this here.
Yes.
Yep. All right, okay. So once you power on your Linux system, it's starting off in the BIOS. The BIOS, the basic input-output system. So basically that's just your hardware. So it makes sure all of your hardware level components are all in place before it can execute the MBR. So hardware components consist of basically your, so let's go and edit this here. So the hardware components, these, even though this is a virtual machine, these are all considered hardware components: memory, processor, your hard disk, even your DVD, your network adapter. All of these components, once you power your system on, it is checking all of those components to make sure there are no issues before it gets to the master boot record. So before it gets to the master boot record. So the master boot record then will execute your grub, your Grand Unified Bootloader, which then executes your kernel, which then executes inittab, init, and init will then, once it gets to init will then choose the run level to boot your system into. So I'm going to explain all of this once our system is basically booting up. So I'm going to power this system off. So I'm going to send you that all of this documentation here that I put together. So I'm powering the system off. So to power your system off is just power off. That's to power your system off. All right, so now our system is off. So as soon as we hit power on, it actually checks all of these hardware components, which is part of your BIOS. Those BIOS is anything hardware related. It checks all of these hardware components first. So let's power the system on. So as soon as the system is coming on, we're going to break it. It's counting down. I'm going to hit the right arrow key, and I'm going to break the boot. So you see where it starts counting down. This is a Rails 6 system. So once you were booting it up, you saw it counting down 3, 2, before it gets to 1 or 0. Once it gets to 0, then it'll just start to boot further. So you want to break the boot, and this is that screen where it was counting down 3, 2, 1. That was your master boot record, where you saw it counting down. That was your master boot record. So the master boot record is what allows you to get to your grub. So let's actually start that over again. So I'm going to reset this, power, reset. All right, so my system is rebooting right now. So right there, that's my master boot record. So I'm going to break it. I'm going to stop it right there. I'm not going to allow it to boot up. That screen that you saw counting down was your master boot record. So that section, in order to get to here, where you're seeing right now, what you're seeing right now, this screen here is your grub. This screen is your grub right here. This screen that you're seeing right now is your grub. So right before that, so the screen that you're seeing currently right now, this is your grub. So we're actually at step 3 right now. So we power your system on. Once you power it on, those are all your BIOS components. Once it starts counting down before it starts to boot into your kernel, that countdown is your master boot record. And once you get to this screen here that we're seeing, this is your grub. This screen that you're seeing right here is your grub. So your grub is Grand Unified Bootloader. This is what allows you to be able to boot into your kernel. So this right here, what you're seeing, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6, 2.6.32-696, this is your kernel. This is the kernel that's running on this system. You can have multiple kernels on your system. So your kernel is basically like the heart of your system. You can have multiple kernels, so it'll boot. So to boot into a particular kernel, you have to install that kernel. So this right here is what we're seeing right now is, this is the grub. You see right here, GNU grub version 097. This is your grub. This display you're seeing right now is your grub. Once I hit enter to get into this Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6, that is then going from your grub into your kernel. So the screen that you're seeing right now here is your kernel. This display you're seeing is your grub. Once I hit enter, it's going to boot into the kernel. It's going to boot into this kernel here. This is your kernel. That's basically the heart of your system. If your kernel is corrupt, then you have a big problem. So this is your kernel. So as soon as I hit enter, I'm not going to hit enter yet, but as soon as I hit enter, it is going to then execute init. Init is a file that tells you the run level on your system that it wants to execute. You understand? So you're not going to be able to actually see that, but as soon as I hit enter, it's talking to init right now. It's a file that's telling me I'm going to hit the right arrow key. The right arrow key actually allows you to see what's going on in the background. So at that point, it was talking to init. So init will then tell you what run level it wants you to execute to be able to boot to the operating system, to the login screen. So let's go over that again. So once you hit the power button, it's loading all of your BIOS components, your CPU, your memory, your hard drive, even your DVD drive, anything hardware component, anything physical, even though it's a virtual machine, just pretend that you can actually, like, those things you can touch. Those are your BIOS components. And once you hit that power button, it makes sure all of those components are in place to be able to get to the master boot record. The master boot record is that screen that you see that starts to count down. That's the master boot record. So once it counts down, it then will display the grub. The grub is just that display. That's all it is, the display that you see where your kernel is located. And then it will boot into your kernel. Once it boots into the kernel, it will talk to init. Init actually holds the run level that it is telling your system to boot into. So let's scroll down here. So we have definitions of BIOS. I'm going to send this document here to you. So These are all definitions of init, run level. So this here are your run levels. So you have run level 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So run level 0 means halt the system, shut down. So we're not going to, you have a question? Okay. All right. So run level 0 means to halt / shut down your system. Run level 1 is single user mode. Single user mode is a mode for maintenance, which I'm going to explain. Run level 2 is basic multi-user mode. Run level 3, which is the default run level on your system. Run level 3, full multi-user mode. So run level 3 is what, okay, so let's go back, let's go back up. So your kernel, so you power your system on, it talks to all of the hardware components on your system. And once it talks to the hardware components on your system, you'll then start to see the countdown, which is your master boot record. And once it's bypassed the master boot record successfully, then it displays the grub. Once it displays the grub successfully, then it boots into the kernel. And now the kernel is then going to talk to init. Init holds the run level, holds one of these run levels that it tells which one to boot into. The default run level is run level 3. That is the default run level that your system, that your kernel is talking to init. Init is a file on your system that the kernel is talking to. And that file holds the run level, the default run level that you have set on your system to be able to boot into the full multi-user mode. So once you get to the login screen, that's basically run level 3. The login screen is basically run level 3. You have full multi-user mode now, which allows you to then log into the system. So, yeah, so let's actually, let me log into here and let's power this off once again. And I'm going to explain it once again. So basically, so this is, I'm going to send all of this to you. This is actually an interview question. Interview question can be, what is your boot process? What is the Linux boot process? So an answer to that would be, once you power your system on, which is your BIOS, and from your BIOS to your master boot record, from your master boot record to your grub, which then boots into the kernel, which then calls the init file to tell you which run level to boot into. And then another interview question is, what are your run levels? So these here are your run levels: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, so I'm going to explain that to you once again. All right, so once you power your system on, you're at the BIOS. It's detecting all of the BIOS components: your memory, your processor, your hard disk, your DVD file, the CD file, your network adapter. All of these other components here are not used. You don't use any of these here. These are the main components here. So as soon as you power it on, it detects your BIOS components, and right here is your master boot record. I can just leave it like that, and then it will actually boot into your grub. It'll go into your grub and then boot into the kernel, and then detect the init, which will call the run level that it needs to boot into. So it didn't display the kernel because I didn't break the countdown, but that's actually what you would see. Let me reset that once again. So it's detecting the BIOS, Now it's counting down, which is your MBR. So if I hit the right arrow key or any key, it'll break the boot. And right here is your grub. It didn't show it at first when it was booting automatically, but this right here is your grub. So from the grub, then it boots from this display. This display is your grub. Your grub is just the display. So from this display, it's going to boot into this item here that it has highlighted, which is your kernel. So now it boots into your kernel. Once I hit enter, it's going to boot into the kernel, and the kernel is then going to determine what run level to execute. The init file is going to tell the system what run level it needs to execute. So once I hit enter, that's basically all that's being done in the background. You'll see this arrow that's loading here. If you want to see what's going on in the background, as sysadmins, you need to see what's going on in the background. So you hit the right arrow key, and this is where you can also troubleshoot your system if anything is failing. You know, we'll see a bunch of green lights. You'll see, if I can take a screenshot of this. 1 second. Okay, let me take a screenshot of that. Okay, I just took a screenshot of that. All right, so you remember the root. Okay, you know what? I'll actually explain that to you in a different session. I don't want to throw anyone off at the moment. Okay, so any questions so far? I know I threw a lot at you just now.
No, I think I'm good so far.
Okay. So I'm going to send you all of that documentation, the boot process and all of that. Okay. All right. So let's say, okay, so now I'm going to show you how to get into, I'm going to send you documentation for all of that as well. How to get into single user mode. So single user mode is actually a run level on your system. All right. So single user mode is run level 1 right there. So that's possibly an interview question. You won't get to ask much, but you're required to know these run levels. Run level 0 is halt, single user mode. 2 is basic multi-user mode. 3 is fully multi-user mode, which is the default run level. Number 4 is unused. So run level 4 is not used at all. You don't use run level 4 at all. It's there, but it's not used. Run level 5 is multi-user mode with graphical user interface. So in order to use run level 5, there are some components that you need to install on your system in order to use this. So it's almost like your system will kind of look like a regular desktop. Instead of the black screen, it'll kind of look like a regular desktop, but you'll still have to use the command line to get to where you need to. And run level 6 is basically to reboot your system. That's what run level 6 is. All right, so how do we get into single user mode? All right, so this is a Red Hat 6 system, and this one here is a Red Hat 7 system. So I'm going to show you, I want to send you documentation for both. We're getting single user mode, RHEL 6 and a RHEL 7. So single user mode is basically maintenance mode. So let's say you are troubleshooting a major issue on your system. Most of the time, you don't want to do that while you're logged in to your regular login screen. You want to boot your system into maintenance mode first to troubleshoot your system with no services running. So your system can still be troubleshooted to determine the issue, but nothing is running on your system. It's a maintenance mode location that allows you to correct issues so that your your system can boot up properly. Sometimes when your system is booting up, it can actually boot directly into single user mode. And if it does that, that means there's an issue on your system. There's something that's preventing it from being able to boot up all the way to the operating system. So that's the reason why sometimes your system can boot directly into single user mode. All right, so let's get right into it. So single user mode on Red Hat 6. So let's reboot our system. So while your system is booting up, so right now our system is rebooting. But while your system is booting up, and I'm going to send you documentation for all of this. So this is getting into maintenance mode on a RHEL 6 system. So while your system is booting up, you break the boot right there. You break the boot, and you make sure that your kernel is highlighted. So right now our kernel is highlighted because we have one kernel. You hit the letter E for edit. You hit the letter E on your screen, and then you scroll down one to your kernel here, and you hit the letter E once again, and then you hit the space bar one time to put a space there, and you can put the number one for single, which is single user mode, and then you hit enter, and then you hit the letter B. The letter B would then boot your system into single user mode. So this process is for Red Hat 6. So right now our system is booting into maintenance mode. Instead of the regular login screen, right now our system is now booted into single user mode. So telling init to go to single user mode. So right now you see in the regular, it kind of looks like we're at the regular login screen, but we're actually in single user mode. So right now we're in maintenance mode. So that's the process of booting your system into maintenance mode on a Red Hat 6 system. So I'm going to send you documentation. So that process that I use for Red Hat 6 is the same exact process that you'll use for booting your system into single user mode. So any questions? I'll do that once again. All right, so I'm going to reboot the system, and I'm going to boot it back into single user mode once again on this Red Hat 6 system. So once it's booting up, you hit the right arrow key to break the boot. You hit the letter E for edits. You scroll down one to your kernel. You hit the letter E once again. You hit the space bar to put a space there. And you put the number 1 for single, which is the run level for single user mode. And you hit the enter key. Then you hit the letter B. The letter B will then boot your system into single user mode. All right, so now our system is booting into single user mode. All right, so now we are currently at single user mode. So single user mode, you can still, create directories. You can still create files. But the thing is, your system is there are no processes or no services that are now running on your system. So it's almost like a safe way to troubleshoot your system. So basically, no one can get into your system while you're inside of this mode. No one from the outside can get in. You're basically blocked out from the network. Your system is not online. It's currently offline at the moment. And it just allows you to be able to make corrections to mistakes that you've made, which is not allowing your system to boot up properly. Like I was saying, sometimes when your system is booting up, it will actually boot up directly to single user mode, which means that there's a problem. Like, okay, my system is now booted into single user mode. That means there's an issue. So now I need to figure out what the problem is correct it, and reboot my system, so it'll reboot directly to the login screen. Any questions?
Makes sense.
Okay. All right, so now I'm just going to reboot this and allow it to boot to the login screen. So now this is rel 7. So rel 7 is, oh, I forgot to tell you. Let's actually boot back into single user mode. So let's say you as a Linux system administrator, I want to boot my system back into single user mode. Let's say you as a Linux admin, let's say there was another Linux admin you were working with, and they were the only ones that knew the root password to your system. And they left the company without giving you the details of what the root password was on the system. So in order to reset the root password if it was forgotten, is to boot your system into single user mode. So the only way to change your root password is to boot it into single user mode. So we haven't gotten to account management yet, but I'll show you what I'm referring to. So let's boot our system back into single user mode. So once our system boots to single user mode, that's the only way you can change the root password if it has been forgotten. So as Linux admins, we have control over that. You know, sometimes you might get into a company where they have their certain policies or so that you have to follow, but this is the process also for resetting the root password on a Red Hat 6 system. All right, so now we're in single user mode. So let's say now we're in single user mode and we need to change the password for root, the root user. So when I built my system initially, let's say you might have forgotten. Instead of having to rebuild your system and change that password, you can boot it into single user mode and reset the password. So to change the password for root, you type, we're not in account management yet. That's a particular topic that we're going to go over, but I'm just going to show you this just really quickly. So PASSWD space root. So password root. Once I hit enter, then it's going to prompt me to put in the new password. So I'm just going to put in the same password, ABC123, and enter ABC123. And it's telling me the password is too simple, but we're just using that just for testing purposes. So I hit enter. So password, all authentication tokens updated successfully. So that's how you would reset your root password. But once we get into account management, we'll go over all of that. So now let's reboot the system again. So that's another reason why you'll need to boot your system into a single user mode, is to change the root password. All right, so now to our rel 7 system. Okay, so now to our rel 7 system. Okay, so rel 7 booting into single user mode is different. So let's do reboot. The boot process is the same. The boot process is the same. Yeah, the boot process is the same, but booting into single user mode is fairly different. All right, so now reboot. So now it's counting down. So, oh, I missed it. Got to reset it again. So once it's counting down, you want to hit the arrow key. What did I do? Or something. Wait, reset. Okay, so when it's counting down, now you just hit up and down just to break the boot. At the bottom, it was actually counting down. So we have just one kernel on here. The bottom one is not a kernel. The top one is the kernel, Red Hat Enterprise Linux Server 3. So the kernel version is 3.10.0-957. That's the kernel version. So the same thing we're going to do is we're going to hit the letter E for edit while we are highlighted over the kernel. So once you hit E, it takes you here. So the line that you're going to look for, you're going to look for this line here where it says Linux 16, right here, Linux 16. You're going to go all the way to the end where it says UTF-8, UTF-8. So you're going to put a space in between there, and then you're going to type rd.break, rd.break. So I'm going to send you documentation for all of this. So rd.break. So this process is booting into single user mode on Red Hat 7. So rd.break. So now I hit enter. Well, actually not enter. So once you do rd.break, you do control X. So once you type rd.break, you'll hold on to the control on your keyboard, the bottom left-hand corner, control X. So now control X will start the process of booting into single user mode. All right. So right here, it has booted our system into single user mode. But now we have to mount the root file system in order to be able to make any changes to our system. So like the, you know how when we partitioned our system, we had the root partition. So we have to actually mount that in order to be able to make changes to our system. So to mount the root partition, this will all be in the documentation. Ugo, you have a question?
Yes, I do. When you type rd.break, I didn't see it on the screen. Do you put a space? Do you anything at the end of that UTF-8?
Yeah, let me. All right, so I'm going to hit E for edit. I'm going to scroll down until I see the Linux 16 here. And I'm going to go all the way to the end where it says UTF-8. So I put a space there, put a space right there, and then rd.break. So we're not going to hit enter once you put that. You're going to do control X, X as an X-ray, control X. And then we'll start the process of booting into single user mode. All right, so now we're in single user mode. But now we have to mount the root file system in order to be able to make any changes, such as resetting the root password. So in order to mount the root file system, it will be mount-o, remount, read write, sysroot. So this will all be in the documentation. Booting into single user mode doesn't have to be something that has to be memorized. You know, it doesn't have to be, you know, memorized. But knowing the process, sometimes you can refer to documentation because it's not often that you have to boot into single user mode. It's common. You'll do it at times, but it's not something that happens every day. So mount-o, remount, comma, read write, sysroot. So that's to mount the root file system. And once that is done, then you have to run the command chroot sysroot. And this is the process that you have to take each time when you boot your RHEL 7 system to single user mode. So then you hit enter there. And now you're in single user mode, properly in single user mode. Some people forget at times to run the mount-o and the chroot sysroot. This is the process that you need to take to to boot your RHEL 7 system into single user mode. So when it comes to changing the password, it's similar. So it'll be password root. So I'll change this password. Let's change it to welcome123. Welcome123. All right, so it's telling me that it's successfully changed. So now that we've changed the password, when it comes to specifically changing the password on a RHEL 7 system, after you've changed it, you need to run the command touch/auto relabel. Touch/auto relabel. And then once you hit enter, then it will finalize your changes. So now it's finalized the changes that I've made as far as changing the root password. And now that is all complete. So now if I want to reboot, if I try to reboot, it's not going to allow me to do it at first. It says fail to talk to a net daemon. You'll actually have to exit out of that first. You have to exit out of that and then reboot. So that process was a little more complex, but that is a proper way to boot your system into single user mode on a RHEL 7 system and to change the root password. So I'll go ahead and I'll show that process again. So now let's reset. So now once it's booting up, so this right here, this is your grub. Just like RHEL 7, this display that you're seeing is your grub. Before that was your master boot record. Once you saw it counting down, that was your master boot record. So now I'm going to hit E for edit. We're going to look for the Linux 16 here, the first line there. We're going to go all the way to the end of that line. Oops, all the way to the end of this line, UTF-8. Hit the space button there, rd.break, Control X. All right, so now we are in single user mode, so now we need to mount the root file system. In RHEL 6, you did not need to mount the root file system. It already mounted for you. So mount-o remount read write space sys root. Enter. Root sys roots. And to change your root password, just be password root. I change it to welcome123. Let's change it back to ABC123. ABC123. And to finalize your changes, touch/auto relabel. Touch space / auto relabel. And then you hit enter. And then you'll exit out of that. And then you'll reboot, which will now boot your system properly to the login screen. So I'll send you the documentation for the boot process, which will include the run levels, which will also include the process for booting your system into single user mode on RHEL 6, and documentation for RHEL 7. So you'll all receive that shortly. And I'll also send out homework for the Linux utilities. Yeah, so you'll receive homework for the Linux utilities as well. All right. Looking for right. Any questions?
No questions so far.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the run levels. So let's go over those run levels once again. So your run levels. So you have that's also an interview question. So what are your run levels? So run level 0 is halt, which means to shut down your system. Run level 1, single user mode. Run level 2, basic multi-user mode. Run level 3, multi user mode. 4 is unused. 5 is multi-user mode. That's a graphical interface. And 6 is reboot. So when your system boots up, it automatically boots up to the default run level, which is run level 3. So let's say you wanted to change that run level. So right now we're on rel 6. So let's say you wanted to change that run level. Let's say you didn't want your system to boot up to the regular default run level 3. Let's say you wanted your system to just boot directly to single user mode every time it booted up. I mean, that's not something you would want, but just for me to show you the process of making those changes. Let's say you wanted your system to boot up into run level to single user mode. So in Red Hat 6, you'll go into, so you'll VI into a file inside of Etsy called inittab, inittab, inittab. That's rel 6. So once I hit enter, this file is where you will make your changes to the run level. So if you see at the very bottom of the file, you see that number 3? That's the default run level. The default run level is run level 3. That's what allows your system to boot into full multi-user mode. That's the regular login screen. Your system boots into full multi-user mode. So this here in Red Hat 6, this is where you'll make that change. So you see at the top here, it tells you 0, halt. It actually tells you do not set this init default to this. So what happens if we change this to a 0? So this is basically, this 0 means shut down. So if we change this 0, change this 3 to a 0, I don't think we'll be able to change it back. So I don't think you will want to do that. So once you power your system on, it will just immediately shut down. So we want to change it to single user mode. So somebody want to give it a try? I'll actually give you control, and you can actually try and change this 3 to a 1 and save the file and reboot. So who wants to give it a try? Come on, don't be scared. All right, Adewale. All right, so I'm going to give you control. All right, so you should be able to click into my screen. Right now, you're inside of a file. So you'll first put yourself into what? Insert mode, right?
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, so let's delete that 3. So you can just delete the 3 and put a 1 there. But you know what? It's all right. You made changes to the file, but you can, what? You can exit :Q. lowercase q, colon q. All right, so colon q exclamation mark, just like that. Yeah. All right, so now we can go back into the file with the up arrow key, back into the file, and all right. So I'll take over really quick. So what I will do, all right, so I'll go to the bottom of the file. I'll put this in insert mode, and I'll basically delete this. So once you're in insert mode, you can do everything that you do like in a regular like Word document, but without a mouse. You know, so you just hit the backspace to delete the 3, put a 1 there, and then we'll save the file. So we escape to get out of insert mode, Shift colon W Q, and enter. So now we've changed our default run level in Red Hat 6 to run level 1. So now what that's supposed to do is, instead of our system booting into full multi-user mode, which is the default, is going to now boot our system into single user mode. So now let's reboot our system. So remember, so the boot process, BIOS, master boot record, grub, the kernel, then a kernel talks to init, which tells you which run level to boot your system into, right? So now let's just give it a second. All right, so now it's telling init to go to single user mode. So now our system boots straight into single user mode because we changed the run level. So now the boot process has taken a different turn. Instead of booting into run level 3, it's booted into run level 1. So now if we continue rebooting our system, it's going to continue booting us into run level 1. So now we're in maintenance mode. Is now just going to continue booting our system into maintenance mode. So how would we get our system to boot back to run level 3? We'll go.
You will need to basically get to that same init tab, and go through the same process and then change the ID to run level 3 instead of 1.
Yeah. All right. So vi etc init tab. Right. And we'll go to the bottom here, and we'll go into insert mode. We'll delete this, change it back to the default run level 3, and then we'll save it. So escape to get out of insert mode, Shift colon WQ, enter. So now we've changed it back to run level 3. So if we reboot our system, it's now going to boot us back to full multi-user mode, because now the kernel is talking to init, and init is telling us to boot to run level 3. Let's hit the right arrow key to see what's going on in the background. So even though you see the line, the thing go all the way to the right, it's good to see what's going on in the background. You just hit the right arrow key just to see how your system is booting up. All right, so now we're back at our login screen. So any questions here?
I have a question.
Okay.
Would it also be different for Red Hat 6 to, do the to have your system boot, Red Hat 7 to have your system boot in single user mode?
Yes, it's different. Yep, I'll just show you that now. All right. Okay. Just a second. All right. Okay, so right now this is our Red Hat 6 system. So this here is our Red Hat 7 system. So now let's log in. ABC123. Okay. So now it's different from how it is done in Red Hat 6. So there is not necessarily a file that you update to make these changes. It is basically something that can be done on the command line. So in Red Hat 6, you'll update the inittab file, Red Hat 6. In Red Hat 7, you use what they call systemd. So in Red Hat 6, you use init. Red Hat 7 uses systemd. So those changes can all be made on the command line. All right, so in order to determine the default run level that you're currently running, you run the command systemctl get defaults. Systemctl gets defaults. So systemctl get defaults. So the default run level that is being used on our system is multi-user.target, which is basically run level 3, multi-user mode. Systemctl gets target. That will display the default run level that is being used. It uses the same run levels, 0 through 6. 4 is still unused. So you have 0, which is power off or halt. You have 1, which is single user mode. You have 3, which is multi-user mode. 4 is unused. 5 is graphical interface, and 6 is reboot as well. All right. So let me actually paste this into a notepad for you all to see. All right. So let me space. All right. So you have power off targets. That is run level 0. You have rescue targets, which is run level 1, which is single user mode. You have multi-user.targets, which is run level 3, which is the default run level. You have graphical targets, which is run level 5, that's graphical user interface. And you have reboot.target, which is run level 6. So now, let's change our run level to run level 3. So to change it, it will be system CTL set default, and the default that we're going to set that to is run level 1, which is rescue.target. So we're going to change, so we're going to add rescue.target. So that'll be rescue, so that right, yeah, rescue.target. So system CTL sets defaults. So what I showed you above was system CTL gets default. So it provided me the default, which was multi-user.target. So we want to change it to rescue.target, which is run level 1, which is single user mode. So once I hit enter, so now it's telling me that it has removed the link that was pointing to the current target, and it's created a new link, which is now pointing to the new target, which is rescue target. So if I go to system CTL gets target, now it's telling me that my new run level is rescue.target. Any questions?
No, sir.
All right. So now let's reboot our system. All right, there we go. All right, so you see at the bottom there, it says, give root password for maintenance mode. So basically what it's doing is telling me, in order for you to get into single user mode, you need to provide the root password of your system. So the root password of this system is ABC123. So when I hit enter, now I'm in single user mode. So any questions? So that is the difference with Red Hat 6 and Red Hat 7. Those are the two differences when it comes to booting into single user mode. So now, if I reboot my system again, it's going to continue booting me into single user mode. So now, let me make those changes. System CTL, what is get target? Let's see what we're going to get. Oh, I spelled that wrong. Oh no, sorry. Get defaults. Gets defaults. I spelled that wrong too. Oh, hyphen. Get hyphen defaults. Okay, system CTL get hyphen default. Now it provides me the run level, which is using the rescue.target. So the rescue.target is run level 1, which is single user mode. So we want to change that to run level 3, which is multi-user.target. So that will be system CTL set default multi-user.target. All right, so now it's removed the previous link and created a new link, which I'll explain to you what these symlinks are in a different topic. But it's removed the link that was pointing to the single user mode, and it's created a new link that is pointing to the multi-user mode. So now if I reboot my system, it's going to go into the boot process once again, and is going to now boot our system to the multi-user mode. So I'm going to hit the right arrow key to see what's going on in the background. All right. Still booting up. All right, so now we are at the boot screen. So now we're at the boot screen. All right. So your kernel. So your kernel, like I was saying, your kernel is the heart of your system. And let's say you want to upgrade your kernel. And I'll show you how to do all of that in a new topic. But once you install a new kernel to your system, it will update your grub. So your grub display will show a new kernel, which now your system will be booting into. So yeah, so if you ever need to, sometimes when you're patching your systems, as far as like updating, there are times where you'll need to actually update your kernel to the newest kernel version. So your grub, which is that display, will actually show the new kernel. Okay, so any questions with boot management?
I don't have a question.
Was there anything that may have stumped anyone? Okay, all right, so let me pull up the boot management. All right, so let's go through this once again. So once you power your system on, those hardware components such as CPU, your processor, your DVD, your network adapter, those are all part of your BIOS. And once you start seeing your system counting down before it boots up, that's your master boot record. So your master boot record is that screen that you're seeing once it's counting down. And once it's counting down, then it'll execute your grub. Your grub is just that display that shows your kernel. Your grub is just the display. So once you see the display, now it will then boot into the kernel. And then from the kernel, it will contact init or systemd and tell the kernel which run level to use. So if it's run level 3, if it's run level 1, your kernel talks to init or systemd on which run level your system needs to boot into. So does everyone understand that process?
Yes.
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 Okay. Oh, that's great. All right. Okay, so that's it for boot management.